It's time right now for the Sioux Falls Real Estate Update with Brent Baker, and he is with Clients First Group and Keller Williams. How are you, sir?
I'm fantastic.
Well, we're excited to have you in the studio today, and we're going to continue our conversation from last week. We're talking about multi-generational, where multiple families are living in the home, so maybe grandparents are living there with the kiddos and with their grandkids. But one of the first things on the list he gave me is to make sure everybody is all on board. That's probably a good first step. Instead of waiting until it's completely built and say, Mom, I just want to show you, this is where you're going to live now. We've been trying to do this with Heidi's parents. We've been trying to convince Charlie and Sandy to move here and to stay with us. So when we get our basement finished, we're going to have it where we can be in the basement, and then the room that we are in now will be our guest room. But we kind of refer to that as their room. And they are not on board right now. She is. Heidi's mom is on board. She's like, oh, you guys are fun. We'd hang out here. And Charlie's like, yeah, I've had enough of you already. So one of these days, maybe. But what are some of the other things? It says there's 9 factors. What are some other things that you want to keep in mind if you're going to be doing this?
Well, something we touched on earlier, and that's your autonomy, your separate spaces. So it's not like when you were growing up as a child, you're right down the hall from mom and dad or whatever. People need space, and if you've been on your own for a long, long time independently, now to be under that same roof, you still need that space. So you need a separate area, preferably with a separate entrance, so you have that feeling of autonomy.
And then I suppose whether they're right next door or across the country, the next one probably makes sense to check in regularly. And,
True.
It's one thing if they're on the other side of the country, but if they're literally on the other side of a wall, to just walk over and say, hey, Mom, how's it going? I mean, that doesn't take a lot of effort, really, but it makes a big difference in their life, I'm sure.
Well, it truly does. I had a coworker years ago who, at the same time, every day called his mother. She lived alone in the house that he had been raised in.
Oh, yeah.
And that was their way of looking after her. Was sister called one part of the day. He called at a particular hour of the morning, make sure she took her medications, everything was okay. And if she wouldn't have answered the phone, well, they would have known there was a problem.
They have another step on the plan then.
Correct. But she could remain in a home that she was familiar with as her mind slowly ebbed away.
Nice. I see number 4 says foster independence where possible. And I suppose that makes a lot of sense too, especially if you're having it where it's not just another bedroom in the house, but there's a separate addition or a separate entrance for them to come and go, to kind of give them some independence and let them be able to live life on their own terms a little bit.
I think another part of that is that you don't want one feeling like they're a burden to the other.
Yeah.
And so I think even though you're under the same roof, you still want separate lives for your own mental health, but also so that you feel like an independent, fully functioning person.
I see number 5 says consider transportation needs, because I guess that's something you'd have to think about too. You know, who gets the garage, or do we have room for everybody in a garage?
Where's the bus stop?
Yeah. And then number 6 says make it personal. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, we all have things or tastes. So, I can think of some mother-daughter situations I've worked with where the daughter's helping mom move, and of course the daughter has very different tastes than the mother. I think the taste should reflect the occupant.
And I would say with my wife and my mother-in-law, their tastes are very different. My wife has very specific taste, and when she's designing things, it's very modern and very dark and very light, and there's a big contrast. And her mother's house is completely the opposite. And there's kind of some, frilly foo-foo things that my wife would not want. But if you're bringing them to live with you, they need to have their own place and their own space that looks like their place.
Correct. Otherwise, they're not going to feel at home.
Yeah, another room in your place.
Right.
How about the looking at the long term? What does that mean?
Kind of goes back to the house, the whether you need grab handles in certain areas, say coming up from the garage. If you still have a house where you have 3 steps up, you might need some grab handles there. Maybe it's widening some doorways.
Yeah.
There's just little things that we don't think of in day to day. ADA compliant means the light switches are at a different level, that you have a 5-foot circle in the bathroom to turn a wheelchair around, and all of those things. So
a lot of different factors there.
There's a lot to look at and to really plan before you just jump in and do it.
And the last two things on the list, number 8, is make sure resources are in order. And I suppose that is just making sure that you have the help you need if you do need help. And the last one is being patient. So the being patient part, that might be the hardest one for some of us. But like I said, we've been trying to convince my mother and father-in-law to move with us. And they have friends down south. We're like, you could go visit, because they always want them to come visit in the winter. And like, oh, we got to stay. We got to shovel our sidewalk. We're like, if you come and move in with us, you don't have to mess with that. So I have to just be patient and wait for him to be ready. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I was pretty happy when my parents started hiring out the lawn and the snow. As my dad had Parkinson's, and so his walking got very unsteady. He needed help getting on and off of his mower.
Yeah.
So there are those services out there, but the other services you might need is, okay, if you're a working person, maybe somebody needs to go and visit your parents at a particular hour and make sure they got their meals, their medication.
Yeah.
And it also helps create that sense of independence, that they're not dependent on you, that you can still have your life, participate in things with your friends.
Yeah.
But yet they need some care, they need some attention. You don't want them to feel isolated either, or that will accelerate other issues.
If somebody listening, we've been talking about multi-generational living. If somebody listening is going, I'm probably in a position where that's about time for us to do that, but there's not room for mom at my place, and there's certainly not room for me at mom's place. It might be time for them to list those two places and buy a place that's different. I know a guy that could help them with that. Oh, it's you.
Wow.
If they would like some assistance with that and finding some help to get to the next chapter in their life, whether it's something to do with multi-generational living or something completely different, how do they get in touch with you?
I can be found at 605-310-0297 or Brent Baker at kw.com.
Very nice. Again, Brent Baker with Keller Williams and Clients First Group. And you can also find him online at clientsfirstgroup.com. And if you caught maybe the tail end of this program, you can listen to it as a podcast at SiouxFallsPodcast.com.